Hi team, welcome to a 10-minute conversation all about really our well-being and how to be a champion for our well-being. We're going to have a conversation about eating disorders. And I just want to set you up for success with this conversation. We have a beautiful guest who's going to share her story and her heart. And I want to make sure that you are set up to receive this in a way that is really all about listening to learn and being able to learn from her story without any projections, without any judgment, without any shame. If you or anybody you know is going through any kind of mental illness or eating disorder or anything from a well-being perspective, we just want to be there for you. We want to get you hope. We want to give you hope, and we want to get you help. So as you listen to this conversation, open your heart and your mind to really receive this beautiful story in a way that is just new thinking for you to really hear it from a perspective of, is there anybody that I'm coaching, or is anybody in my family or myself really struggling in a way that I have maybe been pushing down or suppressing or didn't want to face? Because for us to be a champion for our well-being, we have to start with truth. And so the truth is we all struggle. That's part of our life. It's part of our journey. And how do we do it in a way that is for us or for the person that we are connected to without it feeling like I'm less than because I'm having the courage to come and share what I'm so vulnerable about or something that I'm really struggling with. So thank you for listening to our conversation, and I hope that we give you hope, and we are here to help in any way. Hi team, welcome to 10 Talks. Well, today our guest is Jacqueline, and we're going to be talking about really champion well-being for athletes. So Jacqueline, welcome to the team. And so just thank you for today and for sharing your heart with our team, just about really what you wish you would have known when you were an athlete, and now that you are transitioning into growing up from being an athlete and moving into really being a coach and just starting your adult life. So
yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here and, just share a little bit about, my journey and, offer any words of wisdom that I can.
That is perfect. So we're going to start with really the power of story. And so Jacqueline, share the power of your story. Really just let us know who you are and how you got to be the fabulous person you are now.
Oh, yeah. So, I am a figure skater, and now I'm a figure skating coach and choreographer. And really, figure skating has always been such a huge part of my life. I started skating when I was like 5 years old and just immediately fell in love with the ice and, knew that was, my passion in the sport that I was supposed to do. And I skated competitively from the time I really started around 5 all the way until I was 18 or so. And I truly, first and foremost, feel so thankful to just have the opportunity to, do the sport that I love. And, I've gained so many incredible, valuable life lessons and experiences from skating. But with that being said, with any sport, skating in particular for me, there are definitely a slew of challenges that kind of come along with it. Around the time that I was 12, I began to develop an eating disorder, and that definitely played a big part in, my own personal journey as me, Jacqueline, and also as, an athlete and as a figure skater. In skating, there is a tremendous pressure and emphasis placed on how skaters look. And in an aesthetic sport like that, it can be very challenging, especially as a young girl, or honestly, for the guys that skate too, there's tremendous pressure placed on them as well. But as your body's changing, as you're growing, as you're finding out who you are, having that pressure, linked to your appearance, to your weight, it then equated with your performance in the sport that you care so much about, that's kind of a pressure cooker for a lot of things, to kind of happen and for those challenges to occur. And I think that eating disorders in skating are something that need to be talked about so much more. Like, it's something that, since kind of leaving the sport, so many people have, we've talked, we've connected, and have said they were kind of dealing with the same things. And of course, at the time, no one knew, no one said anything, no one even, talked about it. And kind of coming out the other side, as a coach, I just really hope to, influence my students to have a healthy body image, to prioritize their mental health first, and all of that. So long story short, around the time I was 18, I was kind of in the worst of my eating disorder and some other mental health challenges. And I just completely stepped away from skating. I was like, I'm done. I'm never going in an ice rink ever again. I just am done. And of course, it's unfair of me to just blame all of that on a sport. An eating disorder is a mental illness, and there's so many components that go into it. But being in that skating world was just not helping the situation. So around that time, I completely stepped away from the sport. I started college at Arizona State and just kind of moved on with a different chapter of my life. And as I found, some professional help, some healing, and started to, work on myself a little bit, I got to a point where I realized that I did miss skating, that it was something that I absolutely, needed in my life. I love the choreography and creative side of skating, and I was just really missing having that outlet. And just leaving so abruptly, I did feel like a part of my story with, the sport I had devoted so much of my life to was just missing. So I started to get into coaching again a little bit. At Arizona State University had a collegiate team that began my senior year of college. So I skated on their collegiate team a little bit, and it was an awesome experience just to, be with other amazing supportive girls that were kind of in the same place in life, that I was. And after that, I just really, found my love and passion for coaching, and, and here I am.
Well, thank you for sharing your heart, and thank you for just the gift of really helping other people, because that's the desired outcome of our conversation today, is really to give hope. And to give hope to the other athletes that may be struggling with any disorder or, mental health, whatever it is from a well-being perspective. So let's go back in time a little bit in terms of when we talk about sport, it's really difficult that so much of our identity is inside performance. And certainly putting that physical, mental, spiritual, emotional component to say, I am a winner if I win, and I'm a loser if I lose. Yeah. So we know that from a champion heart. We know that from all of our athletes that we have the honor of serving and supporting. So thank you for having the courage to do your work and to heal and to come back and being able to really help other people. So what do you wish you would have known at 12 when this eating disorder really started? Just take us into that little girl and kind of that moment, because everybody starts someplace, whether they're 18 in college or small, but most importantly, we want them to have hope.
Yeah, I think, at that time, I think that it's very normal for kids around that age to struggle, with their bodies changing, with being aware of your body, with the pressures that are placed on how, people are supposed to look. I think that's really a formative time. And I really just wish that I could tell, my younger self or any other, child at that age, just that there are so many different types of bodies and they are all so worthy. Your body size, the way you look truly has no bearing on your value or worth as a person. I wish that I could just tell my younger self too, that engaging in, disordered behaviors of restriction or purging or over-exercise and all of that, it's not just a choice that, I'll do this for X amount of time and then I'll be fine and then I'll be happy. And once I'm this weight, everything in life is going to magically be perfect, because, really an eating disorder is a mental illness, not just about the way that your body looks. It's a form of control and a form of trying to, have that control over your life. So I really just wish that I could have told myself that at that point before I kind of began, to then spiral down the rabbit hole, and it turned into something that truly was, the most difficult thing, that I've had to go through in my life. And I just think that it would have been so helpful to have had more diversity in the skaters that we see, in the role models that, I would have had to look up to, in the way that other adults in skating, talk about bodies and all of that, that would have just been so helpful. So, whatever little piece of that, I can provide for kind of the next generation of skaters, that's just been a huge, driving factor in why I've wanted to coach and kind of, be involved in that sport, to be a part of that change.
So if you were your younger self and somebody, your older self,
Okay.
came to you and said, don't worry about it, all of that, that people tell us those kind of things all the time. You know that there were, your parents or people really cared about you, and whatever you were struggling with, they, I'm sure, kept assuring you it's going to be okay or whatever. But we hear things really different according to what's going on in our heart, and certainly super connected to our peers.
Yep.
So what do we do with that gap that is between what we know is maybe correct, but what we really feel feels so different? So, and again, we have the blessing of having you here to really take us through that journey, because we may be talking to somebody who's just starting this process, and being able to say some simple words sometimes doesn't cure something that feels so deep in my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just my overall, thoughts and philosophy on how we kind of help this problem in all young athletes. I speak specifically to skaters because that's, the environment that I know, but I think it's applicable, across the board. But I think first and foremost, it's just starting to change the culture that these athletes grow up in. And really that starts with the adults. That starts with the coaches. That starts with parents. That starts with, everyone that surrounds it. And, and I wish that there was a magic thing that I could have said to my younger self, or I could say to some of my students now, that you say one thing and they never have a negative thought about their body ever again, and it's all great. But unfortunately, it's really hard to do that when they're so steeped in this culture of, idealizing thinness, of, that your body and your performance is your worth, that when that's the environment, it's hard to just kind of, break away from that. And I think that really as coaches and as parents and as older athletes that are, role models, like we have so much power in how we talk about our own bodies and how we talk about other people. And I think often, at least in my experience, it's been very rare that I've had anyone have, say anything with malicious intent. I feel really lucky, full disclaimer, I had an amazing coach my whole skating career who was so supportive, never encouraged weight loss or anything like that. But it's when you hear the little comments from someone else, commenting on another kid or another older skater comparing themselves to one of their peers, or parents making comments in the stands as, they're watching your competition, so I think it's most important for all of us to know that it doesn't have to be an overt, direct comment to an athlete for them to internalize those fat phobic messages, that are so harmful to everyone, in every body size. I think it's really important to redefine, the emphasis on the win, to kind of shift to the whole person. And, first and foremost, I think that parents and coaches and, any of the athletes' support system can really help by just not necessarily talking so much about the value of the win, but rather the hard work that goes into it, the dedication, the determination, showing up to try their very best. Whenever my students are, kind of going through a rough patch, they always laugh at me because I'll say like, oh, well, this is one of those times where it's not about skating. It's the life lesson that skating's teaching. And they're like, oh, great, whatever. But it is really true. Skating and any sport does teach great life lessons that you aren't always going to win, that even when you fail, you have to pick yourself up and you have to try again, that if you want to see success, you have to try and you need to put in the effort and the dedication. And regardless of what happens, you need to have good sportsmanship. Yeah. So by praising our athletes for, these traits and for, the whole person, their whole self, and how they're approaching their competition, in life. I think that's how we really emphasize, what's important rather than, just the win.
So I'm putting in all the hard work. I'm committed. I'm learning a lot of life lessons, and I'm not getting a W. And I'm watching people around me maybe not work as hard, or, different. We know life isn't fair. We know sports isn't fair.
Yep.
What do you do from a self-esteem perspective to really make it feel as honorable to be developed to a whole person and really committed to being a whole person as that hit that we get off of the win? Because we crave that. I mean, you're doing all that hard work for it to pay off.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't, is that when the eating disorders or the mental health or things like that begin to really get challenged? And is that a starting place, or where does it begin?
Yeah, one of my biggest gripes with how almost every sports story ever is told is like, if you work hard enough, you can achieve anything that you want. And of course, not to discourage that hard work, but that's not how life works. That's not how sports work.
Yeah.
You can work the hardest of anyone ever, and if it's just not in the cards for you to land that jump, to win that competition, to be at that elite level, it is what it is. I mean, a huge component of sport is just natural ability, and sometimes, an athlete just isn't given that same hand that another one is. And I think that it's important that we be realistic about that, because by driving home this narrative of hard work and if you want it enough, you can get it, that's really harmful, because that's the exact thing that drives people to, to over exercise, right, to an eating disorder, because in the mind of that young athlete, that is what trying hard is. That is giving it their all for something that they really care about. Mm-hmm. So it's important, I think, too, to give all athletes, multiple options. In skating, skating is definitely a sport, right now that is very heavily focused on competitive skating. However, there are definitely tremendous avenues that are growing in the sport, for contemporary skating. I'm involved with an organization called American Ice Theater that has the mission of, making skating more inclusive, providing those artistic skating opportunities, viewing skaters as whole people, rather than just athletes. And I think that there are definitely avenues like that are opening up. Mm-hmm. Even now there's a solo ice dance series, which is kind of a different, path that skaters can take. So I am really happy to see our sport becoming more inclusive, but I think that by diversifying the interests of our skaters, that's a great way for them to achieve those successes that are attainable. It's not, I'm going to the Olympics or I'm not. Yeah. It's those little steps, in the areas of skating that they do excel at that can feel very fulfilling and validating, and helps the whole person feel proud of themselves, rather than just, setting them up for a situation where they're not going to succeed and then therefore, feel poorly.
So those are sports life coaching tools. That's really what we're passionate about, is really bringing in the life coaching right along the sport coaching, because we have this moment in time that we have the heart of an athlete right there, mentally, physically, emotionally, we've got them. And if we're devoted only to the physical side of it, we're really not setting them up for success because we're leaving out all of this that we're talking about. So just being able to equip coaches with the ability to know, what are the tools that I can use to really work on an athlete's life as intentionally while I'm coaching in sport. So when we talk about competitive greatness and we talk about truth, and I come in, I'm an athlete, and I say it's been a hard day, I'm really struggling. How do we still push into, okay, we're going to still have a workout. It doesn't mean that we're not skating today or not working out. We're committed to that, and we're really honoring that you need maybe a little extra something today.
Yeah, totally. I think, you definitely want to still then push them, but I think just then recognizing that, okay, their best performance today might look a little different than on another day, and that's totally fine. That's maybe instead of running a full program, we'll do it in 2 halves. We'll do it in 2 sections. We might spend a little bit less time on jumping and spend a little bit more time on spinning, just so you're still pushing them to improve. And that's teaching them the lesson that sometimes you don't feel like doing it and you still have to do it anyway. But you can also, give space for those feelings to not just push through and, feel guilty for having those feelings arise.
So what's important is we're never burying anything or kind of suppressing it. Instead, we're owning it and we're being vulnerable and we're anchored in truth. And we're really saying, you know what? I matter. Me as a person, this body, my mind, my heart really matters. And I'm having the courage to connect with my coach or my parent or whoever I'm with in an authentic connection. And so that requires safety. That requires some rules, right? Just like setting ourselves up to be safe in sport, to be safe in life, we've got to make sure that we're both committed to really what that definition is. So this is where here's what a win would look like today. So that I still get a sense of accomplishment and I'm still pushing myself through kind of the, I don't feel like doing this kind of moment, and pushing into being competitively great. So team, I hope you're getting to hear as we talk about competitive greatness. We've set it up so that I'm competing for me. One of our winning strategies is every day or every practice really defining what's a win so that I have the sense of owning it, being held accountable for it, and kind of getting that check that's like, I did it and I have a sense of accomplishment. So our next component of really competitive greatness is faith.
Okay.
So we've got to step into having faith in ourselves, having faith in this relationship with our coach and with our parent. So if you watch your film or kind of look back at your life and think about, okay, I'm getting a whole new coaching session here with my life as well as my skating. What did you have faith in as a skater?
I had a lot of faith in the fact that I brought something different to skating.
I love that. Yeah.
You know, I was definitely a competitive skater, but the jumps were not my forte.
Yeah.
I loved always, and obviously still do, the artistic side, and skating is an art form to express, you know, my emotions, to tell a story. And I always did have confidence in that was something different that I kind of brought to the table. So I think just having faith in, you know, my own uniqueness is something that really, really helped me through. And I think every athlete should have that because everyone is unique. Everyone does bring something different, you know, to the sport. And I think just relating to that is so important. You know, I think also having faith in that my coach would be proud of me regardless was incredibly important. You know, I had a very, I still do, not past tense, but, you know, had and still have a very, very special relationship with my coach. He's the same person that coached me from the time I was 6 years old all the way, you know, through my skating career. And I think really I've seen firsthand how much that trusting relationship helps, you know, is so important. And, you know, you hear the horror stories of coaches that don't necessarily provide that for their skaters. And that's something that I know has stuck with me, and I can only imagine would stick with them in a very different way. You know, so I think it's important to have faith in that as well.
So team, you're hearing competitive greatness. Truth is really anchoring in your truth. I love your definition of faith being all about faith in yourself. Faith in yourself, faith in your coaches, faith in your parents, faith in people being for you. Really all about you as a whole person rather than just being for you when you win or for you as a skater, any of those kind of components. So our next component is love. So competitive greatness is being competitively for you, and it's anchored in truth, faith, and love. So let's talk about love. Let's talk about love of yourself so that you can honor you, respect you, really, again, anchor into this whole person. Now, this is a pretty big concept, especially when we're all about winning and we haven't done all this life coaching work that we're talking about. We're standing on the ice or, you know, in sport, and we're pounding in our head, I have to win, I have to win, I have to win. That pressure of the self-talk being all about performance. What about if we were able to introduce from a competitive greatness perspective, what are you thinking about that you love in that moment of pressure?
You know, just in my own journey, I have always loved skating. I have always loved more than anything, you know, the feeling of being on the ice, the feeling of doing what I love and I'm, you know, so passionate about. And I think that sometimes that it can be what gets us in a sticky situation when we love what we're doing so much that we just want to be the best and we want to excel at it, you know, to the fullest extent. And I think being able to make that separation between I can love this and that's enough by itself. It doesn't need to go that extra step of I love this so I need to win. It can just be, you know, love and enjoyment of your sport for its own sake, and that's enough. You know, and at the time that I was skating and competing, I definitely did not have very much love for myself or my body at all. And I think that, you know, in so many ways that led me to just completely abandon skating because I just wanted that easy way to write off that, oh, well, that's where all my problems are stemming from. That's the one thing if I cut that out of my life, everything, I won't feel this way. And of course that's not true. So I think that, through my own, work on myself, finding that love and appreciation for my body, for all that it does for me, for who I am just as a person, that has allowed me to then come back to skating, come back to the sport that I love so much. So I think that the more that we can just instill that you have to have that love and appreciation for your own body, from a younger age, that would just help so much, because if we can get rid of people having to go through this whole journey on their own, that'd be great. So the more that we can just kind of promote that and encourage it in athletes from the time they start would be awesome.
So what a gift to anchor in love and start with love. And because that's where we start in sport. We love it. We're so excited. It's amazing. And then the competition and the pressure and the expectations, it's almost like it's, subtracting the love out of everything that we got started. And so a new way of thinking about adding the love, and you said it so beautifully, is that, I loved skating, but then what it started doing to me started making me not love myself or the expectations. So how do we champion change in really keeping that love of the sport and that passion that I have versus it being taken away from us?
Something I tell my students all the time, another Jacqueline-ism that I'm sure they laugh at me about, but I'm always like, it's your skating. It's your sport. I am here to support you in that journey and to help you be better. But at the end of the day, none of us participate in a sport. None of us should participate in a sport to make ourselves miserable. That is, and when that starts happening, I think that's when, sometimes we either need to support our athletes in taking another direction. And sometimes that means stepping away from sport in order for them to, facilitate that relationship of love with themselves. And obviously that can be a tough thing to do, as a coach.
So let's talk about you and you stepping away from it because you lost the love of it. What do you wish you would have had? What are some words of wisdom or some winning strategies that would have made your story different? I know that your journey is perfect for you and you've done a beautiful job of honoring your journey. We just want to be able to use that journey to give help to others. So what would you say you wish you would have known, or words of wisdom?
Maybe not necessarily words of wisdom, but I really wish that I had gotten some professional help at a much earlier time. And I totally put no fault of that on anyone around me at all. But I think that there is a huge stigma in the world, but especially in athletic communities, about seeking help. And at the end of the day, when you see, a peer or a child or someone else's kid or your own student struggling with something that is, a mental illness, like an eating disorder, or any other mental illness. Of course, I'm just only speaking to, my own experience. I think that sometimes you need a little bit of tough love to get them some help. And I think in that time, eating disorders are so secretive. You don't want anyone to know. You want to keep it all inside. And sometimes you're not in a place where you can ask for that help. So I think I just wish that I would have gotten to that place, a little bit sooner, because when you offer out, that hand, people want to take it, no one wants to be in that place, of struggling, of being in the thick of it. And, when someone is in that place, there are no magic words to say to suddenly make it better. And I think that it's important for, coaches, for parents to recognize that, okay, I'm out of my depth here and I love this person and I can't necessarily be the one to make it all better. And I think the more that we can do that and destigmatize that, the better.
So that's a support team. I hope you are hearing that. And Jacqueline, you said it so beautifully that really to support an athlete, we need the parents to be parents. We don't want to lose that position. Love them. Be president of their fan club. Whatever it is that you want, hold that position of being a parent. Then we have a coach that's on the support team. Their job is to coach the athlete up. We have the athlete on the support team to be able to be the person receiving the love from a parent, the love from a coach. And then maybe we need a sports psychologist. We may need a sports life coach, whatever. We may need a therapist. Those are the positions that you start to fill based on the uniqueness of the athlete. So just as you're devoted to finding a great coach for your unique athlete, find a great support system that really says, I love you, I care about you, and I'm looking out for the whole person of you rather than just you winning. So again, as great as all this sounds, how does a person ask for help?
I think that sometimes, as a coach or a parent, sometimes that requires having the tough conversations in order to be an advocate for either your child or your athlete. In an ideal world, of course, the parents are great and supportive, the coach is positive and great and supportive, but unfortunately that's just not always the situation, that occurs. So I think as a coach, sometimes it requires having those tough conversations with the parent of saying, this is what I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis, and being that advocate for the athlete. And on the flip side, if a parent is seeing behavior from a coach that is not conducive to, helping grow and support your child as a whole person, it requires the parent having the tough conversations and sometimes taking some, drastic action that could make some shockwaves. But at the end of the day, we can't look at our skaters, our athletes, and say it's all on you to advocate for yourself, because of course someone that is in the throes of an eating disorder, or other mental health condition, you can't put that responsibility on them to say it's all on you to advocate and make this happen, because especially when our athletes are minors, some of that control in terms of, financial access to resources, to things like that, shame and stigma within the family, a coach treating you different. Those are all things that have a huge impact on, their decisions. So I think as adults, being that advocate, even when the athlete might be upset with you for it, that's when you have to have some pretty solid morals and take the steps when you need to. This
is when we're for whole person versus just when we're there for the W, for the win. So, okay, we've had some tough conversations. We've talked about really owning what's happening. What are the winning strategies for a person to recognize that an athlete is struggling?
I think just again speaking kind of about eating disorders, but all of this I'm sure definitely applies on a bigger scale. But it's, I think, very common, signs like body checking, skaters that will adjust their clothes and constantly look at themselves in the glass to make sure they look okay. If athletes will never train without a jacket on. Obviously that's a pretty unique one to skating, because most other sports,
it's all good. Jacket, we're right here with you. Yeah.
Skaters that won't skate without their jacket on, skaters that constantly are making comments about their body, about how they think other skaters look. If you never see your skater eating, or your skater frequently going to the restroom after, lunchtime, because that's when, we would normally see them. But just looking out, for all of those signs. And, the great thing in many ways about, kind of our teenage, kind of adolescent demographic is that they really will say a lot of what goes through their mind, especially when they're younger. And I think it's important to listen and to hear them and not just write it off as like, oh, they're just being a 12-year-old, whatever. Because if they're telling us in their own way, what's going on, we need to listen. And as a coach, it is a privilege to be able to see the same group of skaters on a daily basis. So, even any, drastic changes in mood and behavior, things like that are all important to look out for. And, just expressing to them that you're here if they do want to talk about things that are going on, just listen.
Yeah. So team, I want you to hear that huge winning strategy. Listen to learn versus listening to have them be what you want them to say or do. So I think that happens a lot, is that, I'm not listening to you with the desired outcome of really hearing you. I'm listening to you to be able to come back to something or coach you up or tell you you don't feel that way. So team, that's a great takeaway from this beautiful conversation. Just start with listening. Really listen authentically with the desired outcome of learning. What can I learn about my athlete? What can I learn from the coach? I'm listening and really receiving it versus listening to convince or set an expectation or to implant, really to take what I'm feeling and put it on you.
Yep.
So listening is a winning strategy. What else do you wish that you would have had the courage to do when you started? I want you to be 12 and, you know, how does an eating disorder start? How do we even recognize that?
Yeah, you know, in my particular situation, there was a very close friend of mine that went through the same thing, you know, for many years, and it was kind of happening at the same time. Okay. And I think that that definitely contributed to, you know, both of us not being our best selves. Okay. You know, because when you're that age, you don't know what you're supposed to be saying. You don't know anything about, you know, mental health or anything like that. You know, and so the conversations that we would have would definitely fuel, you know, disordered thoughts and things like that. And there were definitely adults around for a huge chunk of this. And I think, you know, I just wish that someone would have, you know, stepped in. And I think that it is so important to, you know, as parents or as coaches or whoever, when you are stepping in a situation like that, to do so from a place of love and understanding, not from a place of, how could you do this? I'm so disappointed in you. You know, I'm angry at you that you would do this, because that, you know, and I understand that as a parent of a child struggling with an eating disorder, it's hard. It's hard for you to know what to say, to know what to do, that it could be shocking. You know, you don't want to see it. But recognizing first and foremost that, you know, any eating disorder, addiction, mental illness, any negative coping strategy like that is a result of a lot of pain happening, you know, in that child or in that person. It's totally not limited to children. And I think that when we approach it from that way, rather than from a place of judgment of, oh, why don't you just stop? It's so simple. You know, that really only makes it worse. And I think the more that everyone involved, you know, can do their own work to unpack their own unconscious or conscious, you know, biases or assumptions, you know, is something that we need to all continue to do.
So what's really difficult about this is that if I'm a parent, which I am, I have 3 fabulous little women and they've all been in sports, is that I'm super connected to you, not only as my child, but my identity could be inside of your performance, inside sport. I mean, I'm investing a lot. There's a lot going on. So we talk about really no shame, no judgment, being for you, really helping. But I may really struggle to understand, like, what the heck, what's happening? And one thing that's really personal to me from a compassion perspective is just that with an eating disorder, I mean, food is part of what we need. So it's not like don't drink or don't do drugs or, you know, don't. It's like we need you to eat. And so now what really feeds your soul and feeds you and is part of our social life is so much part of our life. You're struggling with it, and I may not have any idea, and I may have no tools whatsoever to be able to equip that, because now I don't know how to feed you. Then I'm nervous that you're going to the bathroom and throwing up. Like, all of a sudden it turns into this game of really failure. Like, I feel like a failure as a parent. I don't know how to support you. So let's just talk about how powerful that is, that it's a mental illness with something that you need. And you need to eat. And so how do we do that?
I think, you know, once it's at that place, just the more open and vulnerable that the parent can be, the better, you know, to just say, I don't know how to support you. What do you need from me? How can I help you? I love you. I'm here for you through this, you know, because I think that the more that, you know, parents or a coach, you know, kind of tiptoes around it or doesn't want to talk about it or tries to say something that they think is helpful but is actually super harmful and triggering, you know, then it leads to even more of this environment where the person struggling feels like they can't talk about it, like it's taboo, like it's a bad thing, like it's deserving of shame, you know? So I think having those uncomfortable conversations, you know, is just the most important, and admitting when, you know, you're out of your depth, when you need to get that professional help, you know, is so important. You know, and but in an ideal world, you know, before someone, you know, would start to be struggling with that, I think, you know, hearkening back to a little bit of what I said earlier, the more that parents can be aware of how they talk about their own bodies, of how they talk about other people's bodies, has such an impact too on how they talk about food. It's, you know, it's very common in, you know, the American culture that we live in, that all of us are so, you know, steeped in diet culture, in certain foods being good, other foods being bad, that, you know, some foods are a reward when other, you know, foods are what we're supposed to eat. And I think that it really requires, you know, all of us to unpack, you know, those biases that we've been taught by other people, you know, because that impacts how we're teaching, you know, younger children, you know, to think about food and how they're supposed to view it. You know, and in the same thing in terms of body size, like, you know, there's so much fat phobia that exists in every corner of the world, you know, and as a parent, you have a really big influence of how you talk about, you know, other people, about yourself, about bodies in general. And that's what impacts, you know, how kids view the world and all of that. You know, and I just think it's really important that as a parent, you know, and as people, that we recognize that also eating disorders do not have a look. You know, sometimes people look very visibly ill, but that is not the only thing that constitutes an eating disorder. There are tremendous amounts of people that have a quote unquote normal BMI. I mean, I personally think the BMI is trash, but
we'll leave that.
We'll leave that for another day. You know, but I think just recognizing that you can't just look at your child and wait for them to be at a place where they look sick, rather focusing on the behaviors, you know, because when behaviors are the same, whether or not it has an impact on body size, that's kind of beside the point. It's an eating disorder regardless. And I think that, you know, the more that parents can recognize that, the more people, you know, that will get help and will not have to, you know, deal with, you know, all of this for so long.
Well, and Jacqueline, the other part, the secret part about it is that pretty soon you become competitively great or an expert at covering up, right? I mean, and that's such a sad, you're covering up yourself, like you're covering up who you are. So talk to us about really how this starts, because you talked about you were 12. I'm, you know, thinking of my little women at 12 and you know, they wouldn't know how to start an eating disorder or right. Like they would know how they're feeling. They'd be like, I feel fat or I feel, but they wouldn't know how to do something about it.
I think first and foremost, you know, as adults, we need to give kids a little bit more credit than we sometimes do. You know, I think as a parent or a coach, it's easy to be like, well, my kid at age 12 wouldn't have any idea about that. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of times that's just not the case. You know, and I think, and this is totally just my personal opinion, this is not
and your story,
not scripture, anything like that. But I think that oftentimes as adults, we don't want to have the real, the tough, the, you know, more mature conversations with kids because we don't want them to have to think about those things. But a lot of times they already are, you know. So like if, you know, as a young kid, I remember being introduced to eating disorders in 2 seconds in health class. Okay. Well, of course, then that's not the framework of which to understand, you know, a very complex, nuanced mental illness. You know, you just hear a blurb and then parents don't want to talk about it. You know, no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to acknowledge it. And I think that by doing so, it's actually not shielding our kids. It's creating more of a taboo about things that they're already dealing with.
And curious about, and certainly experiencing. Yeah, it's real.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and even I think kids pick up on so much more than we know too. Like if I'm a parent and I'm at the grocery store and I'm turning over the package and saying, oh, this one has too many calories, let's not get that. Well, you might not necessarily be saying to your child, you know, don't eat a lot of calories, but that is subliminal messaging that is completely influencing them. You know, and I know for kids that grow up in households where parents are constantly dieting, that's a very clear message that if I don't like my body, restriction is the way to change my body. You know, so I think really just having those conversations and creating the space to have those conversations, is a way to kind of help that, you know, and I think everyone's eating disorder, I'm sure, starts for a whole variety of different reasons. And I think it's also important that as we have this conversation, we acknowledge the fact that there also is just a predisposition that some people have. You know, most kids around that age, you know, deal with certain body image issues, and it is, you know, there's a whole biopsychosocial, you know, influence that does lead to an eating disorder. You know, so I think, of course, like we try to take the steps to, you know, facilitate healthy body image, but, you know, there is no one size fits all approach to stopping it, just as there's no one size, you know, fits all thing that this one thing happened and then that led in a direct path, you know, to an eating disorder.
So how did you learn what to do in terms of to kind of, you know, take your desire to be thinner or that illness that you were wrestling with a little person, no tools, no understanding, you just had a feeling, and how did you take that feeling into an action? Yeah,
so, I mean, just saying this stuff, it like makes me sad because it's kind of messed up. But I remember literally at like age 10, you know, this was when iPod Touches were like all the rage.
Okay.
And I remember on my iPod Touch, I downloaded some calorie counting app because an older skater, my family and I had gone out to dinner with an older skater and her family. And this older skater and her dad, which I mean, it makes me feel for her because I'm like, she was clearly being influenced by other things as well. But we're talking about this calorie counting app, and her dad was so proud of her for using this to, you know, be committed to her skating and all of that. And totally innocently, I was like, oh, what's that? You know, just curious.
And you're 10,
about
right?
It. Yeah. Like, and you don't even realize that there's anything, you know, wrong with that or anything like that. So, you know,
and the dad's doing it thinking he's supporting her, thinking that he's praising, oh, you're doing such a good job. I mean, this is what's so confusing. Like everybody's intentions are so for each other, and yet internally we're just taking it in such a different way.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and that's why I definitely want to make it clear that, you know, like my lens through experiencing this stuff is only my lens. Yeah. That is not at all, you know, placing anything on anyone else. You know, but what's going on in your own head definitely influences how you take in the world. Right. You know, but I think that was kind of the first thing I could pinpoint as, you know, a starting point.
So you're 10, you watch this experience with an older skater and a dad, and we learn an app. Okay.
So, you know, then I started doing it, and, you know, I'm naturally a pretty competitive person, and then it just becomes a contest of like, oh, well, it said I, you know, met my goal today. Can I get more under it tomorrow? Okay. Can I get more under it tomorrow? Yeah. You know, and it definitely for me got to a point, you know, where like, I hate to admit it, but I could probably tell you the calories in like just about any food ever, you know, and it just spirals and it spirals and it spirals, you know, and to be honest, I'm not sure exactly where I first heard of or discovered purging, you know, but very much the same kind of thing where you do it once and you're like, oh, this is easy. This is great. This is a good way to, you know, still achieve my goal, but not have to have an awkward situation at dinner where I don't want to eat anything and everyone else is. You know, and at first it seems like, you know, the easy fix, whatever. And then, you know, as eating disorders do, it just spirals to a point where the more you do it, and then you realize you're like, I can't stop doing this, or I don't want to stop doing this. You know, and then it's influencing every aspect of your life of when you hang out with your friends, what time you eat, when you do this, like, you know, and of course then it becomes, you know, to a point where it's really, you know, just negative in every way. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing. Oh my goodness. You just, you know, you are such a gift, and thank you for giving hope. And team, what a blessing we have been given to just be able to step inside your story and hear about it. And most importantly, I want you to know that you and your story matter.
Yes.
Please be a champion for your well-being. Whether you're an athlete, whether you're a coach, a parent, whoever's listening, do your part to just figure out how to be your best self. Look at your support team, find help. We are here as sports life coaches to serve and support you, to coach you up in your life as intentionally as sport coaches are coaching to be great athletes. And so, Jacqueline, as you think about just speaking into the lives of anyone that's listening, what do you wish that we know, just going forward from today forward, how can we be part of a champion for change?
I think most importantly, you know, each and every one of us is so complex, so unique, so multifaceted. And I think recognizing that as we approach our athletes, and just recognizing that, you know, as we look at ourselves, is so important. You know, you're more than an athlete, you're more than your sport, you're more than your body. You know, you're every one of the complex pieces of yourself, and just don't feel like you need to make any of that fit into a box, or that you need someone else to fit into that box to be, you know, palatable to you or to society.
What a gift, team. I'm going to challenge all of us to really step into owning our strengths, to owning what makes us happy. What is it? How do we become healthy for us? How do we champion change in a way that really affects all of us in our family, wherever we are? You know, let's get really educated. So when I think about this great conversation, I'm going to start with listening to learn, really connecting to the people that I love, my athletes, my coaches, whoever it is. And I'm going to listen with that heart of really, I want to learn about you. I want to learn about the complexity of you. I want to learn about what's going on in your head. And then I want to learn about how to connect you to an expert or somebody on your support team that can really help develop you in a great way and help you learn more about you, rather than suppressing or shame or judgment or any of that that says you are not fabulous just the way you are. So being able to be competitively great for you, for me. So that's what we're going to do, team, is be a champion for our well-being. Be a champion for your family. Be a champion for your partner. Be a champion for you. And so make it a 10-week. Go out and enjoy being healthy and choosing how to listen and learn. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, team, what a conversation. We have had the honor of being able to listen and learn. And so if you or anybody you know wants help, needs hope, whatever you need, we want to connect you to experts. Please go for having the courage to really be a champion for you. Talk to your parents, talk to your coach, talk to anybody that is a safe person for you to really be able to open up, be honest about what you're struggling with, and most importantly, connect to an expert so that you get the help that you need. Thank you for being a champion for your well-being, and thank you for having the courage to be a champion for you.